Welcome to Buddha Dharma TV Sunday program. I am Lisa Chu. Namo Buddhaya. Today we will start with a sermon followed by a song and our weekly dose of Dhammapada. We will begin our program with a sermon by Dr. Bhikkhu Bodhi, who is an internationally known Buddhist scholar from New York in the United States of America. Dr. Bhikkhu Bodhi had his monastic education under the late Most Venerable Balangoda Ananda Mathera Mahanayaka Thero of Sri Lanka. His sermon today is on Buddhist Abhidhamma. We respectfully invite the Venerable Master to educate us on Buddhist Abhidhamma. This is the first part of it.
Okay, so I'm very honored and happy to be able to attend this Dhamma Realm Buddhist University, and I understand that this will be like one of the first courses given here. Is that the case? In this space, yeah. Okay, so the topic that I'll be speaking about in this course is we call it the Theravada version of the Abhidharma, because there are actually several versions of the Abhidharma which have come down through the textual transmission. There is the Theravada version which prevails in the Theravada school, which is a form of Buddhism that is practiced in Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos. Yeah, there was another school that put a lot of emphasis on the Abhidharma called the Sarvastivada school, which prevailed in the early centuries of the Common Era. It prevailed in the northwest of India, in the area that's now Kashmir, and they had their own Abhidharma system, which is quite different from the Theravada version of the Abhidharma. When I try to read the Sarvastivada Abhidharma, I feel like I'm an English speaker, as I am, who suddenly found himself in Germany and trying to get around with his English in Germany. And then there seems to have been a third school of the Abhidharma, which was, it spread in the far northwest, in the area that now corresponds to Pakistan and eastern Afghanistan. And they left an Abhidharma text which is preserved only in Chinese. It's called, the reconstructed title is the Abhidharma, the Sariputra Abhidharma Shastra. I think it would be something like Sali for Abhidhamma Lun, something like that. Okay, but the significant difference between these three schools of Abhidharma is that the Sarvastivada school doesn't exist anymore. Its Abhidharma system is preserved mainly in Chinese translation, a few texts preserved in Sanskrit, maybe some Abhidharma commentaries in Tibetan, but there's no school which is practicing that form of Abhidharma. And the school that followed the Sariputra Abhidharma Shastra again vanished centuries ago. But the Theravada school still exists and still studies and practices the Abhidharma, even today. Okay, now first coming into the Abhidharma, we should understand the source of the Abhidharma is in the Pali Canon itself. That is the collection of scriptures preserved in the ancient Indian language called Pali. And the Pali Canon is divided into three major sections, which is why it's also called the Tipitaka, or Sanskrit Tripitaka, the three collections or three baskets of teaching. So what are these three collections? There's first the Vinaya Pitaka, which is the collection which emphasizes the rules and regulations for the Sangha, the rules of monastic behavior, proper behavior, the regulations for performing the collective functions of the Sangha. So that's the Vinaya Pitaka. Then there is the Sutta Pitaka, which contains primarily the discourses of the Buddha and of some of his great disciples, like Sariputta, Mahakachana, Moggallana, Ananda, and so on. And then the third collection is the Abhidharma Pitaka. Now, we can pretty much infer that at least the original or more archaic parts of the Vinaya Pitaka originated from the Buddha himself. At least the rules and the regulations did. Probably most of the Sutta Pitaka originated from the Buddha himself. But where did the Abhidharma originate? The Abhidharma has a very, very different character from the Sutta Pitaka. It's not in the form of person-to-person discourses, but it takes the form of 7 treatises, like philosophical treatises, which are extremely technical in their language, which use an extremely technical method of analysis and explanation, a kind of technical and very precise systematization of the Buddha's teachings. So where did the Abhidharma originate from? And here there is a significant difference of opinion between what we would call the Theravada tradition, the mainstream Theravada tradition, and modern scholarship. Okay, the Theravada tradition, as preserved in the Pali commentaries, says that the Abhidharma originated as the text of the Abhidharma originated with the Buddha himself. They say that the Abhidharma commentary says that the Buddha realized the Abhidharma during the period after his enlightenment, when he was still staying in the vicinity of the Bodhi tree. He stayed in the vicinity of the Bodhi tree for 49 days, and during this period it said that he contemplated all of the details of the Abhidharma as a complete and integral system. Okay, then the narrative continues. In the 7th year after the Buddha's enlightenment, he made a trip to the Tavatingsa, one of the heavenly worlds, expressly for the purpose of teaching the Abhidharma. And he did this because he wanted to repay the kindness of his mother. His mother, Mahamaya, passed away 7 days after he was born, and she was reborn in one of the Deva worlds. And so it's said that the Buddha went to the Tavatingsa, I think in Sanskrit, Triyatingsa, Deva world, in order to teach the Abhidharma to the Devas, making his mother the chief recipient of the teaching. But then it said that while the Buddha was teaching the Abhidharma in the heavenly world, each day, in order to sustain his body, he would come down to the human world, to a very obscure part around the area where I think Mount Kailash is, Lake Anuttara. This is, I think it's almost on the edge between India and Tibet. And Sariputta would go to that region each day, and the Buddha would tell Sariputta what aspects of the Abhidharma he had taught during the previous day. And then Sariputta was the one who took the teachings from the Buddha and then arranged them and set them into a textual form. So in this way, the Theravada tradition says that at least 6 of the books of the Abhidharma derive directly from the Buddha, coming from the Deva world, the Buddha's sojourn in the Deva world, and the summaries of the Abhidharma that he taught to Sariputta. So that is the traditional view. But modern scholarship takes a different view. And according to modern scholarship, and I have to say I agree with modern scholarship, the Abhidharma is a body of teachings which emerged through a gradual process of evolution. And to see how we get from the Nikaya teaching to the Abhidharma, I just collected some texts. Actually, I'd collected them some time ago, but I created this file this afternoon, realizing it would be easier to present it visually so you could see for yourself. Okay, the word Abhidharma occurs in the Sutta Pitaka, in the collection of discourses, but we never see in the Sutta Pitaka a statement to the effect, the Buddha was teaching the Abhidharma to the monks. We never find anything like that. But rather, the word Abhidharma always occurs in the context of discussions that monks are holding amongst themselves. And so to support this point, I've collected a few passages. Okay, so this is from Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 32. Here, the Venerable Mahamoggallana is speaking to Sariputta, and he's describing two monks are holding a discussion on Abhidharma. They ask one another questions, and they answer one another's questions, and they do not stumble in their discussion, and so their Dhamma discussion flows on smoothly. And so for those who know the Pali or are interested in Pali, we see the expression here that two monks are discussing an Abhidhamma discussion, or holding an Abhidhamma discussion. Okay, another passage. Okay, in this passage it says that several elder monks had assembled after their meal, and they were sitting, holding a discussion on the Abhidhamma. And then there was one rather irritating monk named Chitta Hatti Sariputta who kept on interrupting the discussion of those elders as they discussed the Abhidhamma. And then another statement I took from Anguttara Nikaya. Okay, when a monk is asked a question about the Abhidhamma or the Abhivinaya, he answers and he does not stumble in his conversation. So from this, it seems that we can draw the inference that Abhidhamma meant discussions about the Dhamma that took place between the monks. And probably these discussions would have taken the form of monks sort of testing one another by one monk asking the other questions, and then the other having to answer those questions. And probably as time went by, those questions and discussions became increasingly more technical and analytical. So whereas the Buddha was principally a practical teacher who was out to teach extensively in readily comprehensible terms the path to liberation from suffering, the monks, even during the Buddha's time and later generations, started to explore the implications of his teaching and then to treat it in a more and more technical, analytical manner. Okay, so out of these discussions, over time there would have evolved a new body of teachings, more detailed and technical than the discourses of the Buddha himself. And so it was these additional teachings, more technical teachings, which came to be called Abhidharma. But we can already see in the Nikayas, the collections of the Buddha's suttas, certain trends that are pointing in the direction of this more technical, analytical method of teaching. So I've collected several passages which illustrate this. So I call these tendencies towards the Abhidharma that could be found in the Nikayas, that is, in the suttas. And interestingly, several of these passages involve Venerable Sariputta. And so when later generations see Sariputta as the kind of formulator of the Abhidharma, even though that might be an exaggeration, but Sariputta, his manner of teaching, seems to have planted the seeds out of which the Abhidharma developed. Okay, so here we have a passage. This is Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 28. This is the longer discourse on the elephant's footprint simile. So Sariputta is speaking to the monks, and he says, when the eye is intact and external forms come into its range, and there is the corresponding act of attention to those forms, then there is a manifestation of the corresponding type of consciousness. Okay, so now we have an act of consciousness, an occasion of consciousness, and now Sariputta is going to locate in that occasion of consciousness the presence of the five aggregates. So he says, the material form in what has thus come to be, that is included in the material form aggregate. I think probably all of you are familiar with the five aggregates. Anybody doesn't know what the five aggregates are? Okay, good. Because if you raise your hand, I have to say, go back to elementary Buddha Dharma. Okay, so we have material form, the feeling that is present on that occasion, that's included in the feeling aggregate. The perception is included in the perception aggregate. The volitional formations included in the volitional formations aggregate, and the consciousness itself goes into the consciousness aggregate. So that is how there comes to be this classification of dharmas into the five aggregates. So this is almost like a starting point of the Abhidharma that we see developed much more extensively in the first book of the Abhidharma, called the Dhammasangani. Okay, here is another sutta, and in this case it's the Buddha speaking, but he's speaking about Sariputta, about the way Sariputta practiced meditation in order to reach his final goal, to attain arahatship. So he says that, and this is the standard formula for the first jhana, or in Sanskrit, the first dhyana. He says that quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states of mind, Sariputta entered and abided in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. Okay, that is the standard formula for the first jhana that occurs like 1,000 times in the Sutta Pitaka. But then the Buddha adds something else. He says, the states that were present in the first jhana, then he enumerates them. The applied thought, sustained thought, rapture, pleasure, unification of mind, contact, feeling, perception, volition, and mind, zeal, decision, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention. These states were defined by Sariputta, each one as they occurred. And he knew those states when they arose. He knew them when they were present. He knew them when they disappeared. Okay, so this is the way, it's showing the way Sariputta investigated, looked into this meditative state of the first jhana, and then was able to distinguish in that state the different constituents, the mental components. to break that state down a little bit the way scientists, when they get the atom, then they break the atom down into the subatomic particles. Okay, so these kinds of suttas, which take an analytical approach, can be seen as a kind of root out of which the Abhidharma developed. Another source, and this comes from the Buddha himself, are suttas. They're called Vibhanga suttas. The word Vibhanga means analysis. And so we find scattered in the Sutta Pitaka a number of suttas which analyze the main themes or topics of the suttas. So in this sutta from the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha is speaking about the five aggregates. So what are the five aggregates? Whatever form there is, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is called the form, or material form aggregate. And so the same way, the feeling aggregate, perception aggregate, the volitional formations aggregate, the consciousness aggregate. Okay, so this is a kind of analysis or explication of the five aggregates, each one defined in the same way. Okay, some other examples. I didn't take quotations, but it's enough just to refer to them. We have a sutta that provides an analysis of the links of dependent origination. Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 12, number 2. An analysis of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. An analysis of the four foundations of mindfulness. An analysis of the five spiritual faculties. So these are some analytical suttas. Okay, now I just quoted above, that analysis of the five aggregates that we find in the suttas, but in the suttas, we don't find explanations of these terms, past, future, present, internal or external. They're just left understood. But this is what is taking place in an Abhidharma text. This is an Abhidharma text called the Vibhanga, the book of analysis. And so here we have the first chapter of this book of the Vibhanga is on the five aggregates. And here it repeats the formula. I just took the Pali, but it's easy to follow. So this is the definition of the material form aggregate that we just read in English from the sutta. So then the Vibhanga raises the question, what is meant by form that is past? And it gives a definition. What is meant by form that is future? And you see it has a whole string of terms. Form that is past, that is stopped, that is gone, that is vanished, that is passed away. There are more words in Pali for things that are past and gone than in English. Okay. Future, present. What is meant by form that is internal? So the form that belongs to the different types of living beings, their personal form, their own form, their individual form, their acquired form, the four great elements and the material form based on the four elements. That is called internal form. And similarly, analogously for external form, gross and subtle, inferior and superior, far and near. Each one is given an extended definition. So it's a little bit like a technical textbook for understanding the suttas. Okay, another source for the Abhidharma It's said, according to the Western scholars, is... Oh, wait, let me just before I come to that point. This is my own conjecture or speculation that the Abhidharma would have developed particularly out of one of the Nikayas, one of the 4 or 5 Nikayas in the Sutta Pitaka. Does anybody have any guess what that Nikaya is? Somebody who's familiar with the Nikayas? Say it? No, say it again. Not Anguttara, no. No, not the Majjhima. There are 2 left. Right, exactly, the Samyutta Nikaya. And now I want to show you something that's interesting. Okay, this is a comparison, a little table that I prepared this morning, showing in one column, this is the Vibhanga, the second book of the Abhidhamma Pitaka, and this is the Samyutta Nikaya. In my supposition, the Vibhanga is probably, or at least parts of the Vibhanga, are the oldest part of the Abhidhamma Pitaka. And here we could see the chapters laid out in the Vibhanga. Analysis of the 5 aggregates. In the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 22 is a big chapter on the aggregates. Analysis of the 6 sense bases. Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 35, same topic. Vibhanga, analysis of the 4 or 6 elements or 18 elements. Chapter 14, same topic. Vibhanga, chapter 4, analysis of the 4 Noble Truths. Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 56, on the 4 Truths. And so for the faculties, dependent origination, the foundations of mindfulness, the right efforts, the basis of spiritual power, factors of enlightenment, factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, each one has a corresponding chapter in the Samyutta Nikaya. Okay, another source now for the or kind of root out of which the Abhidhamma would have developed was a group of teachings that is referred to in the suttas called the Matika. Maybe I should write that word on the board. Okay, the Pali word is Matika. The Sanskrit is it Matrika, Lauren? Yeah, I think it's this. But anyway, it's easier to pronounce if we do it this way. Otherwise, you have to do that rolling R. Matrika. Does anybody know what this word means? Or the origin of this word? And you don't have to know Pali or Sanskrit to know the meaning. It's exactly like the English word matrix. And does anybody know where, in fact, I wasn't thinking of that, but that is right. Where the word matrix, what it's related to. What is that? I'll give you a hint. It's a member of the family. Exactly. Probably in a European language it might be clearer. But anyway, it's clear enough in English. And what does a mother do? I mean, initially to become a mother. What does a woman do to become a mother? Gives birth to children, right? So a matrika is a kind of outline of the teaching from which one can generate other aspects of the teaching. Just like a mother gives birth to children, so the matrika is a way of summarizing the Dhamma and condensing it into a list. Then out of that list, one could get children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. To give you an example, here's a matrika. We have, the 37 Bodhipakkhya Dhammas. I translate that as the aids to enlightenment, the factors contributing to enlightenment. We have the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts, the 4 bases for spiritual power, the 5 faculties, 5 powers, 7 factors of enlightenment.
We would like to present a meaningful song that begins with "We Shall Overcome" by Bdtv.
We shall all overcome, we shall all overcome, we shall all overcome the greed in us. We shall all overcome, we shall all overcome, we shall all overcome the hate in us. We shall conquer illusions and find true liberty, that which leads us through this troubled sea. We shall go beyond the shore, be peaceful evermore, 'cause we cry and sigh no more. And together we'll see everlasting peace, when all our fear and worry cease. We shall all overcome, we shall all overcome, we shall all overcome the greed in us. We shall all overcome, we shall all overcome, we shall all overcome the hate in us. We shall conquer illusions and find true liberty, that which leads us through this troubled sea. We shall go beyond the shore, be peaceful evermore, 'cause we cry and sigh no more. And together we'll see everlasting peace, when all our fear and worry cease. We shall all overcome, we shall all overcome the fear in us. We shall all overcome, we shall all overcome, we shall all overcome the doubts in us. Clear away our minds' confusion, ever watchful till the end, bravely walk our way to freedom land. We shall dwell in peace and love, rejoicing evermore. Rejoice, we have found the Lord. By this law shall we live, through this law shall we see the joy and peace of
Now it is time for the weekly Dhammapada sermon, a collection of sayings of Buddha, which one of the best known Buddhist scriptures and most widely read. The weekly Dhammapada sermon, 81, will be presented by Venerable Professor Bhante Sivali. Let us welcome Bhante Sivali to present a brief sermon on the verse 81 of the Dhammapada.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Welcome to the Dhammapada program of the Bdtv. Today we are going to discuss the verse number 81 of the chapter 6 on the voice. It begins with Selo yatha ekagano vati na samirati evan ninda pasamsasu na samijjanti pandita. The literal meaning is that the voice remained unchanged, unmoved, and unruffled, both by praise and humiliation. The voice remains unshaken under all vicissitudes of life, like the solid rock that withstands the buffetings of wind unmoved. This is a very important piece of advice, like all other advices given in the Dhammapada. There are 8 kinds of fortune, good and bad, that affect people. It's called labha, alabha. Labha means gain. Alabha means loss. Ayaso, yasocha, neglect and attention. Ninda, pasamsu. Ninda, humiliation. Pasamsa, praise. Sukha, pleasure. And dukkha, pain. Those words, labha, alabha, ayaso, yaso, ninda, pasamsa, sukha, dukkha, all these Pali words have big meaning. These are 8 kinds of fortunes. These 8 are described as the 8 vicissitudes of life. Atta loka dhamma. The ordinary masses are shaken by these vicissitudes, but the wise remain unshaken by them. The wise ones are aware of the changing nature of the world. In response, they remain unmoved by it. In this stanza, this mental stability is compared to the stability of the rock that remains unshaken by the wind. The awareness of the wise ones and their unshaken mind in the face of such vicissitudes are important to know. The wise person considers all these vicissitudes carefully and notes that they are subject to fluctuation. His mind is not shaken by good fortune, nor is he depressed by misfortunes. It is this recognition impermanence that helps him preserve his calm. This recognition of impermanence that helps anyone to preserve his calm. Of course, the wise one. This was a piece of advice given in this verse. Once upon a time, there was a group of monks living near the Buddha. And there was a recently ordained elderly person who was short in stature. So those monks and nuns made fun out of him. Sometimes they even pull his nose and robes and made fun out of him. But he has never been angry. He has never been whatever form didn't express his dissatisfaction. Therefore, these monks informed the attitude of this monk to the Buddha. At that time, Buddha uttered this Selo yatha eka gano vate na samirati evan ninda pasansatsu na sapanjanti pandita. It is good to know this beautiful meaning of this verse. And Buddha said that even disturbed by anything, the wise remain unmoved and unruffled both by praise and humiliation. The wise remain unshaken under all circumstances of life, like the solid rock that withstands the buffetings of wind unmoved. Ninda pasansasu, both in praise and blame, the ordinary people tend to be shaken. When someone sees that something goes wrong, they are depressed. When things go well, they are elated. But the wise are unshaken. Whatever the fortune they face, it is said that people in general face 8 kinds of vicissitudes. They are described. In Pali language, like labho, alabho, ayaso, yasocha, ninda, pasansa, sukhancha, dukkham, ete anicca manusi dhamma, asassati viparinama dhamma. There are 8 kinds of fortune. And 8 are described as the 8 vicissitudes of life. The ordinary masses are shaken by these vicissitudes, but the wise remain unshaken by them. The wise ones are aware of the changing nature of the world. In response, they remain unmoved by it. They remain unmoved by it. In this instance, this mental stability is compared to the stability of the rock that remains unshaken by the wind. The awareness of wise ones and their unshaken mind in the face of such vicissitudes are summed up in the commentary. Knowing this, the mind of sage closely observes the changing experience his mind not lured by pleasing experience. What is not pleasing, he does not hate. All these vicissitudes are subject to fluctuation. Therefore, one's mind is not shaken by good fortune, nor is he depressed by misfortune. It is this recognition of impermanence that helps the wise to preserve his calm. Regarding the nature of this monk who got his ordination later part of his life, whose name was Bhaddiya, Lakuntaka Bhaddiya was added name was because he was short in stature. So he was called Lakuntaka Bhaddiya. Though he was diminutive in stature, he had a melodious voice. Among the 8 Maha Arhats, his voice was preeminent. Of all gifts of speech, is the most precious. His superb voice came next to the Buddha's voice, compared to the singing of the bird called Kuravika, the Indian nightingale of the Himalayas, the king of the birds, with a sweet voice. His short stature, from which the name Lakuntaki came, was the result of a past karma. Arhant, the enlightened Lakuntaka Bhaddiya's voice was deeply prized. In the Bhaddiya Sutta, the Buddha praised him, saying that he, though humpbacked and unsightly, was highly gifted, and his character was most lofty. Buddha declared that Lakuntaka Bhaddiya was preeminent in the Sangha for his voice. His voice was vibrating with music, bringing men to Dhamma's fold, curing minds by the psychic. Though he was pure and funny to behold, so it was nice. He was funny to behold. That was Buddha's explanation regarding this Lakuntaka Bhaddiya. The Zen monks made fun out of him. But he was unshaken because he is advanced, enlightened. Just like a rock that will never be shaken by the powerful wind, so are the enlightened wise ones, will never be shaken, will never be moved by the praise or blame, by the gain or loss. So we also have a lot to learn from this. We must try to balance our life. We should not, when we get something, we should not be overjoyed. Always to be joyful is good, but not overjoyed. Because When there's praise, blame is inherent in that. When the gain is there, loss is inherent there. When the birth is there, death is inherent there. When the praise is there, blame is inherent there. So we should not change according to circumstances. We must face them intelligently. We must try to understand the true nature of these things. So it is not only for one, but for everyone, gain and loss, blame and praise. All these things are present with us. Be aware of those things. Be aware of those things. Try to face the situation accordingly. Because somebody blames, you should not react. When you don't react, you try to respond. That is the real way to handle the situation like that. Also, when somebody praises you, you should not be moved by that, but try to understand. Blame is inherent in the praise. In blame, there is praise is inherent. These are the vicissitudes of life. If it is raining today, there will be sunshine tomorrow. If it is cold today, tomorrow will be warmer. If it's a pleasure today, there will be pain tomorrow. So these are we call world order of the universe, kind of order of universe. So we should not be moved by them. We should not be moved by them. We should try to understand the situation and face them intelligently. Then we will be very happy. That is the meaning of this verse number 81. May you all be well and happy.
That concludes today's program. If you have any questions about the contents of our broadcast, please feel free to reach out to us at info at buddhadharmatv.com. Our dedicated team remains committed to sharing the profound teachings of the Buddha, helping you walk the path of wisdom and enlightenment. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next week at the same time. Namo Buddhaya.